name is Billy Mugambi, also known as Mr. Sketch, which is a name I picked up several years ago when I first went on TV to do a children's art segment on a show called Club Kiboko on KTN. Some of you who are as geriatric or nearly as geriatric as myself will remember that. Um, my art journey has been a very interesting maze, if I could call it that. I haven't had what you'd call the straight shot kind of art experience. I know I've always been significantly artistic. I would draw and paint and color and craft and sculpt whenever I got the chance to. And never with any particular reason, really. It's just because I enjoyed doing it. And if I found materials around me, well, I took them and I used them. I went through your typical regular primary school and high school experience where I think my art understanding and appreciation was significantly enhanced. I had a fantastic art teacher in primary school. I think he was the one big reason why I continued to do art and eventually took it up as a career. The great one and only Kyoko Mutiki, who brought the whole, you know, welding of scrap metal to produce awesome sculptures art form to prominence in Kenya. Well, at that time, he was not doing those kind of sculptures, but he always did something very, very interesting. Every time you had a class with him, you knew that you would not be doing the normal everyday stuff. I remember one time we had to do bar soap sculptures, and I got so absorbed in my sculpture. I worked on it day and night, and at the very end, I decided I needed to polish it and give it an authentic look, and I used an unused shoe brush. I coughed, sneezed, and wheezed for the next 3 weeks or so, but I'll always remember just a sense of satisfaction I got from producing that sculpture. And I think that triggered in me a sense of almost invincibility, if I could call it that. I could try out absolutely anything artistically, and somehow, at some point, I would pull it off, which has been the mindset or mentality that I've always carried with me when I produced art, that I would try it out and I would pull it off if I set my mind to it. So, what has my journey been like? I finished high school, and I remember the first painting I ever did, because the school that I went to didn't offer art as part of the curriculum disciplines, but rather an art club produced art whenever art was needed. But the first painting I ever made for the grand opening of the school's new pavilion during the 20th, was the 25th anniversary celebrations of the school, and we set up our pieces the night before the opening, and the next morning my piece, among others, was gone. And I figured if people could steal my art, then maybe people could buy my art. If it was good enough to steal, it was probably good enough to sell. Well, fast forward a few years, and I am between school and uni, and I need to make some extra shillings, and I started making bookmarks, and then I started doing portraiture, and I was doing wall hangings, calligraphed, and just this, that, and the other. But my hands were always engaged in something. Many of the things I made, I gave away. A good number of the bookmarks that I made, I would transport to Keswick Bookshop, and they were my biggest and most faithful customers. They would purchase every bookmark I made, and I think I kept replenishing, I think every probably 2 or 3 weeks, which was my first experience with anything commercial art. And then I started getting people that would order, custom order portraits, and would custom order wall hangings and calligraphed inspirational quotes and cartoonified, stuff. And by, I was doing, bigger and more elaborate pieces. Again, I never quite found myself in one particular line of producing art. I know I always did something that was, involved or engaged in the art world, one way or another. Then I got on TV and I started doing this thing with Club Kiboko, teaching children how to draw. That was straight out of uni. I studied design at the University of Nairobi. I was also doing photography for events, corporate events, birthday parties, and I started doing wedding photography, funeral photography. So there I was. If I wasn't with my camera, I was with my paintbrush or I was calligraphing. I always just had my hands in different elements of art. And then I started building props for corporate events, and that became another one of my passions. I always wanted to simulate something out of real life, and the more extraordinary it was, the better. Yeah, and I had interesting clients who always got me to push my boundaries just a little further and push my extremes just a little harder. And yeah, so I was making props and I was photographing the props and posting those, on social media and any other platforms that at the point I was exposed to introduced me to a greater diversity of new clients. And of course, clients kept coming back. And so, if I wasn't doing props, if I wasn't doing photography, if I wasn't doing painting, I was teaching children art. And interestingly, even when I did the corporate props, the people that seemed to appreciate it the most were children. So after several years of doing what I've done, I think I've come to appreciate that as much as I had my hand in different elements of the arts, the one thread that has remained consistent all through is for some reason my art is very appealing to children. And I had a stint most recently as a children's pastor, yeah, surprisingly, one of our local churches. And I think that is where that theory was tested to the point of fact that I seem to resonate best with children and with those who are children at heart, and that my best art and my best work really is reserved for this interesting human demographic called children. And that really is the long and short of my art journey. If it appeals to children, I'm at my peak. If it doesn't, there's a problem, and that problem's gotta be with me. Yes, and that is, in a very, very big nutshell, the art portfolio journey of Mr. Sketch.